All right, so are you ready for a wild one?
Oh, I think so.
Because today's deep dive is going to be a wild one.
Lay it on me.
We're tackling the age-old question of how do you separate the true revolutionaries from the master manipulators?
Ooh, yeah.
You know,
Tricky.
the ones who can rally a crowd, spark a movement, but leave you wondering, are they changing the world?
Right.
Or just playing everyone for fools?
Yeah, it's a question that I think is probably more relevant now than it's ever been.
Absolutely.
With all these influencers,
Yeah.
online personalities,
Yeah.
where charisma can be weaponized and controversy can be a fast track to fame.
It's true. And today we are diving deep into the life and career of Tommy Robinson,
Oh, boy.
a figure who has stirred up more than his fair share of both admiration and outrage.
Yeah, he's a man who has been called a folk hero, a free speech warrior, and a dangerous demagogue, all in the same breath.
All in the same breath.
So how do we sift through the noise and get to the truth?
Well, we've got a mountain of sources to help us out here.
Okay.
We've got Wikipedia entries, news articles, even a podcast episode where he's interviewed.
Nice.
And our mission is to figure out once and for all,
Here we go.
is Tommy Robinson a grifter?
Okay.
Or is he gifted?
I like it.
Now, just a quick heads up.
Huh.
Tommy Robinson is a deeply polarizing figure.
For sure.
And the information that we're about to uncover can be intense.
Yeah,
But remember, we are here to present a balanced view,
absolutely.
letting the evidence speak for itself.
That's what we do.
We're not shying away from the controversy
Yes,
or the difficult question.
No. All right.
Our goal is to give you a nuanced understanding of this complex figure so you can form your own conclusions.
Exactly.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. Tommy Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon,
Okay.
was born in Luton, England in 1982. He was adopted,
Okay.
had a working-class upbringing, and bounced around various jobs before finding his calling in activism.
Right. And it's worth noting, I think that Luton at the time was experiencing some, pretty significant social and economic changes.
Yeah.
There were growing tensions around immigration,
Right.
identity, and these issues would later become central to Robinson's ideology and his rise to prominence.
Interesting. Okay, and that rise began in 2009 when Robinson founded the English Defence League, better known as the EDL.
PDL.
The group emerged in response to a protest against British troops returning from Afghanistan
Okay.
and quickly gained notoriety for its street demonstrations, often marked by clashes with counter-protesters.
Yeah, the emergence of the EDL really coincided with, I think, a broader trend of rising Islamophobia,
Yeah,
far-right sentiment across Europe.
right.
The decline of the British National Party
Yeah.
created a vacuum for a new, more aggressive movement, and the EDL stepped in to fill that space.
Interesting. So they claim to only oppose Islamic extremism, not Muslims in general,
Right.
but their rhetoric often blurred those lines,
Yeah, for sure.
leading to accusations of hate speech and incitement to violence.
Yeah, and their tactics were often, confrontational and provocative.
Yeah.
With these large-scale street protests that frequently resulted in violent clashes with police and counter-protesters,
Oh,
these events really created a climate of fear and division
yeah.
while also imposing, significant costs on local authorities for policing and security.
And Robinson himself quickly became the face of the EDL,
Yeah.
a charismatic and outspoken leader who wasn't afraid to court controversy. He was a regular fixture in the media, giving fiery speeches, engaging in heated debates, and attracting both fervent supporters and vocal critics.
He was a master of,
Yeah,
of getting attention.
yeah.
But his rise to prominence was also marked by a series of legal troubles.
Really?
Even before the EDL,
Yeah.
Robinson had convictions for assault.
Wow.
And in 2012, he was caught using a fake passport to enter the United States.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, and then there was the 2012 mortgage fraud case where he acted as the instigator,
Yeah.
connecting the individuals involved in the scheme, which ultimately resulted in losses of over £160,000. This landed him an 18-month prison sentence.
Yeah, this pattern of illegal activity, even
Yeah.
before his, major involvement with the EDL, it raises questions about his judgment
Uh-huh.
and his respect for the law. It also suggests a willingness to exploit others for personal gain,
Right.
even if it means crossing legal boundaries.
Interesting. So we've got this complex character, Tommy Robinson,
Yeah.
leading a controversial movement, racking up legal charges, and all the while his star is rising.
Mhm.
How does that even happen?
Well, I think part of it is his mastery of media, especially in those, kind of the early days of social media.
Right.
Robinson was an early adopter.
Yeah.
He really understood how to use platforms like Facebook and Twitter
Yeah.
to spread his message, to build a following, and to, really bypass those traditional
He
gatekeepers.
presented himself as a voice for the voiceless someone who wasn't afraid to challenge the establishment or speak uncomfortable truths
Right.
and stand up for the ordinary British citizen.
And I think that, that message really resonated with a segment of the population
Yeah.
who felt like ignored, marginalized, or threatened by the rapid pace of social and cultural change.
Right.
They saw in Robinson a champion for their concerns, someone who, articulated their anxieties and frustrations.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing.
No.
Robinson's confrontational style and inflammatory rhetoric also landed him in some serious legal hot water,
Oh, yeah.
particularly when it came to his actions surrounding ongoing court cases.
Right. And this is where the question of, grifter or gifted
Yeah,
gets really tricky.
it does.
Because on one hand, Robinson consistently framed his actions as, defending free speech,
Right.
exposing what he perceived as a cover-up of Muslim grooming gangs
Right.
by the mainstream media and the authorities.
Right.
But on the other hand, his critics argue that he was deliberately manipulating the justice system
Right.
and exploiting sensitive cases for personal gain and publicity
Yeah.
with, a blatant disregard for the legal process and the potential harm to victims.
And these weren't just minor infractions. We're talking about multiple imprisonments for contempt of court,
Right. Serious stuff.
where he was found to have breached reporting restrictions
Yeah.
that were in place to ensure fair trials and protect the integrity of the judicial system.
You can't do that.
In 2017, he was jailed for filming defendants in a grooming trial,
Yeah.
potentially influencing the jury and jeopardizing the trial's outcome.
Right.
And then just a year later,
Yeah.
2018, he was arrested again for similar actions during a trial in Huddersfield,
Wow.
leading to another prison sentence.
And this is where that Free Tommy movement really takes off.
It does.
It's fueled by online support, right-wing media, and a growing narrative that portrays Robinson as a martyr for free speech, unjustly persecuted for speaking out against Islam.
It became this global phenomenon,
It did.
with rallies and protests held in his support in various countries,
All over the world.
further cementing his image as this folk hero fighting against a corrupt and oppressive system.
Yeah, but we have to ask,
Yeah.
is this genuine advocacy for free speech?
Right.
Or a deliberate attempt to shield someone who repeatedly and knowingly violated the law?
Yeah.
Is it possible that his supporters were being misled?
Right.
Their genuine concerns exploited for a cause that was less about principle and more about self-promotion?
It's a tough question,
Yeah, it is.
and it's one that goes to the heart of the grifter versus gifted debate.
Right.
If Robinson was truly motivated by a desire to expose injustice and defend free speech, why did he repeatedly engage in actions that directly undermined the legal process and potentially harmed the very people he claimed to be protecting?
Good question.
And this pattern of behavior continues even after he leaves the EDL in 2013.
Oh, really?
He briefly flirts with the mainstream,
Interesting.
working with the Quilliam Foundation,
I've heard of them.
which is a counter-extremism think tank.
Okay.
But that association is short-lived, and he's soon back in the far-right spotlight.
Okay, so he tries his hand at electoral politics, running as an independent candidate in the 2019 European Parliament elections, and later as a UKIP candidate.
Yeah, he did.
But both campaigns were plagued by controversy, violence, and ultimately failure.
Yeah, it seems that his confrontational style and history of inflammatory remarks didn't translate well to the world of mainstream politics.
Yeah, I guess not.
And then there's his attempt to rebrand himself as a journalist.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Starts producing documentaries, writing articles, and presenting himself as a citizen journalist, exposing the truths that the mainstream media is supposedly suppressing.
Yeah, that's a common tactic.
It is.
But, this too is met with skepticism.
Yeah.
Critics point out, his lack of formal training, his blatant disregard for journalistic ethics,
Right.
and his tendency to, cherry pick information and distort facts to fit his narrative.
Yeah, it seems like he's always playing the role of the outsider,
Yeah.
the rebel, the truth teller, even when the evidence suggests otherwise.
Right. And that raises the question, is it all an act?
Is it?
Is he deliberately cultivating this image of the persecuted underdog to garner sympathy, attract followers, and ultimately profit from his notoriety?
And then there's the question of his finances.
Oh, yeah. Always follow the money.
Right. Despite declaring bankruptcy and owing significant sums, he manages to fund his legal battles, travel extensively, and produce documentaries Where's all this money coming from?
It's a mystery. It's
Yeah.
fueled speculation and conspiracy theories.
Right.
Some suggest that, he's being bankrolled by wealthy right-wing donors.
Right.
Others point to his connections with foreign organizations that share his anti-Muslim agenda.
And speaking of those connections,
Yeah.
Robinson has received support from some pretty controversial figures and organizations over the years. Groups like the Middle East Forum and the Gatestone Institute, known for their Islamophobic views, and ties to right-wing extremist movements, have openly backed him and provided him with platforms and resources.
So these associations really raise concerns about his true motivations.
They do.
And the potential for him to be used as a pawn in a larger geopolitical game.
Yeah.
Is he genuinely committed to the causes he claims to champion?
Right.
Or is he simply a useful tool for those who seek to exploit his charisma and his ability to rally a crowd?
And then there's the 2018 incident that we touched on earlier.
Oh, right.
The one involving the Syrian refugee schoolboy in Huddersfield, this case for many, is the ultimate litmus test for whether Robinson's a grifter or gifted.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
It's a case that reveals a lot about his tactics, his ethics, and the potential consequences of his actions.
For sure.
Okay, so let's unpack this Huddersfield incident. We've got Tommy Robinson, already known for his anti-Muslim rhetoric,
Yeah.
getting his hands on a video of an altercation at a school. What happens next?
Well, he takes this isolated incident, strips it of context,
Right.
and crafts it into a narrative that aligns perfectly with his pre-existing agenda.
So he paints this Syrian refugee boy already facing the immense challenges of adapting to a new life in the UK
Right.
as a violent thug who attacked a young schoolgirl.
And he goes beyond just presenting the video.
Oh, right.
He makes a series of inflammatory statements,
Right.
accuses the boy of being part of a larger problem of Muslim violence and aggression,
Right,
essentially
right, yeah.
turning him into a poster child for his anti-immigration, anti-Muslim ideology.
It's a classic case of taking a kernel of truth. There was an altercation.
Right.
And twisting it into a full-blown fear-mongering campaign that preys on people's existing anxieties about cultural difference and the perceived threats to their way of life.
Exactly. And what's particularly disturbing, I think, is that Robinson knew,
Yeah.
or should have known, that the narrative he was pushing was false.
Right.
The boy, in reality, was the victim of bullying himself,
Wow.
targeted because of his background and his refugee status.
And the impact of Robinson's actions was devastating.
Oh, yeah.
This boy, who had already experienced so much trauma and displacement, was subjected to a torrent of online abuse, death threats, and real-world harassment.
It's awful.
His family was forced to uproot their lives and move to escape the constant fear and intimidation. Their attempt to build a new life in the UK was shattered by a campaign of hate, fueled by misinformation and amplified by someone with a massive platform and a devoted following.
Yeah, it's a chilling example, I think, of
Sure.
how quickly things can spiral out of control in the age of social media,
Right.
how easily misinformation can spread, and how devastating the consequences can be for those targeted by these campaigns of hate.
Absolutely, and it raises serious questions about Robinson's motivations.
Right.
Was he genuinely concerned about the safety of the schoolgirl?
Right.
Or was this just another opportunity to exploit a sensitive situation, stir up outrage, and further his own agenda?
Well, the fact that he lost a libel case
He did.
brought against him by the boy's family and was ordered to pay a hefty sum in damages suggests that his actions were not driven by a genuine concern for truth or justice.
It's a legal victory, but it can't undo the damage that's been done, the trauma inflicted on this family, the fear and distrust sown within the community, the reinforcement of harmful stereotypes. These are wounds that may never fully heal.
That's true. And, this case, more than any other, I think, forces us to confront the core question of this episode.
Right.
Grifter or gifted.
Yeah.
Can someone who so blatantly disregards the truth, manipulates information, and exploits vulnerable individuals for their own gain truly be considered gifted?
Or are we dealing with a master manipulator, a charismatic figure who has honed the art of exploiting people's fears and anxieties for personal profit and political gain? We've examined his journey from the streets of Luton to the global stage.
They have.
His rise and fall, his legal battles, his shifting alliances, and his enduring appeal to a segment of society that feels unheard and disenfranchised.
That's right.
We've seen how he's used his mastery of media, his confrontational style, and his inflammatory rhetoric to build a following, attract attention, and advance his agenda.
For sure, but we've also seen the darker side of his tactics.
Right.
The disregard for the truth, the manipulation of information, the exploitation of vulnerable individuals, and the incitement of hatred and violence.
So where do you, our listener, land on this question? Is Tommy Robinson a grifter, or is he gifted?
Yeah.
We've presented the evidence, the context, the multiple perspectives. Now it's up to you to decide.
Maybe this deep dive has sparked more questions than answers. You
Yeah,
know?
I might have.
Maybe you're questioning the nature of truth in the digital age,
Right.
the role of social media in shaping public discourse, or the challenges of navigating a world where facts are contested
Yeah.
and opinions are deeply polarized.
And that's, okay, the goal of this deep dive wasn't to provide a definitive answer,
Right.
but to equip you with the knowledge, insights to form your own informed opinion.
That's what we're here for.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those critical thinking skills sharp. Because in a world saturated with information, the ability to discern truth from fiction, to separate genuine voices from opportunistic manipulators is more crucial than ever.
Could not agree more.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Tommy Robinson. Until next time, stay curious and keep asking those tough questions.